Told my sister's boyfriend to get out after he refused to eat the meal I cooked. So, here's what happened. I, 28F, invited my sister, 25F, and her boyfriend, 26M, over for dinner. I love cooking and had spent hours preparing this fancy meal: homemade pasta, a slow-cooked ragu, a salad, and a tiramisu for dessert. I was really proud of it and excited to have them over. When they arrived, everything was fine at first. We sat down and I started serving the food. Her boyfriend, let's call him Steve, stared at the pasta for a moment, then looked at me and said, "I don't eat carbs." At first, I thought he was joking, but nope, he was dead serious. He goes on about how he's a super into keto and carbs are the enemy. Okay, fine, that's his choice. But when I offered to make him a salad or something else on the spot, he refused and said that I should have known about his diet beforehand. This is where it gets weird. He then pulls out a small Tupperware container from his bag, filled with what looked like boiled chicken and broccoli, and starts to eat it at my dinner table while the rest of us are trying to enjoy the meal I spent hours making. I was stunned and honestly kind of insulted. I told him it was rude to bring his own food without mentioning it to me beforehand, and he should have at least given me a heads up. He then goes off about how people need to respect his dietary choices and that I was being controlling by not accommodating his needs. At this point, I'd had enough. I told him, if you can't eat what's served and won't even let me make something else, then maybe you should just get out. He stood up, said something like, "I'm just trying to be healthy," grabbed his Tupperware, and walked out. My sister stayed for a bit but eventually left too, saying I overreacted. My sister's mad at me, saying I embarrassed her boyfriend and made them both feel unwelcome. My mom thinks I should apologize, but my friends are on my side, saying Steve was being incredibly rude. Update. Well, y'all, buckle up because things have escalated in a way I never expected. After my initial post, I figured things would calm down once my sister had time to cool off. Spoiler alert, they did not. So, the day after I told Steve to leave, my sister texts me saying they wanted to talk things through at a family dinner. I assumed it would be just the three of us, maybe at a neutral restaurant, where we could hash it out like adults. Nope. Instead, my sister invites my parents, my brother, and Steve's parents to this dinner at my parents' house, turning it into some kind of weird intervention. I show up thinking it'll just be a casual conversation, but the moment I walk in, Steve's mom, let's call her Carol, is already going off about how Steve has always had special dietary needs, and how people who care about him should respect his boundaries. The woman acts like the guy has a life-threatening allergy, not a trendy diet. My mom is sitting there looking super uncomfortable, while my dad's just quietly sipping his beer, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. So, Carol starts listing off Steve's dietary restrictions, and she's acting like I personally offended the whole keto community by serving pasta. Then, brace yourselves, Carol pulls out a folder. Yes, a literal folder with printouts. She hands one to me, one to my mom, and one to my dad. I'm flipping through this thing, and it's full of Steve's dietary guidelines, suggested meal plans, and even a list of keto-friendly restaurants we could go to in the future. At this point, I'm doing everything I can not to laugh, but it gets worse. Steve pipes up and says he's willing to forgive me for disrespecting his lifestyle if I agree to host a redo dinner where I follow his dietary restrictions to the letter. He says this will prove I'm serious about making amends and respecting his needs going forward. I thought he was joking, but no, he was dead serious. He even pulled out his phone to show me some keto recipe apps that I might find helpful. I was in total shock. My sister, by the way, said absolutely nothing during all of this, just staring at her plate like she wanted to disappear. My mom, bless her, tries to smooth things over by suggesting we all just eat whatever we want when we're together, but Carol snaps, it's not that simple. She says that in their family they all follow keto together, and that's why Steve is so passionate about it. At this point, I've had enough. I stood up and said, look, I'm not redoing the dinner. I'm not making anyone a special keto feast. If Steve can't eat what I cook, that's fine, but bringing his own meal to my dinner without even telling me was disrespectful, and I'm not apologizing for feeling that way. And then, this is where it gets absolutely bonkers. Steve's dad stands up, points at me, and says, this is exactly why Steve doesn't trust women to understand him. They always make it about themselves. The whole room went silent. My dad finally spoke up saying, I think it's time for you all to leave, and started walking toward the door, basically escorting Steve's parents out. Steve and my sister stayed behind, but Steve was furious. He started yelling about how a family should support each other, and then accused me of trying to sabotage their relationship because I'm jealous of what they have. At that point, I just walked out and left the whole mess behind. Here's the kicker, though. A couple of days later, my sister called me and told me she and Steve were taking a break because she needed time to think. Apparently, this whole keto fiasco was the last straw in a long list of controlling behavior from Steve. She didn't realize just how bad it was until the whole family saw it play out at dinner. She even told me that Steve had been trying to get her to follow his diet for months, but she was hiding snacks in her car just to get a break from all the keto madness. So now, Steve's gone full radio silent, my sister is staying with me for the time being, and I'm still getting passive-aggressive texts from Carol about how hurt Steve is and how he's just misunderstood. Honestly, I'm just glad my sister is finally seeing how controlling this guy was. Second story. My sister wants me to change my wedding date. So, I'm in a bit of a weird situation. My fiancé and I aren't the most traditional and wanted to have our wedding as more of a family vacation with the bonus of a wedding. My parents have a beautiful lakefront house where we decided to have our wedding. When we were initially planning our wedding and figuring out dates, I wanted to have it on June 26th. The 26th was important to us because that's the day my fiancé and I first met. But when speaking it over with my family, my sister said no because she already had a vacation on that date. I was sad, but it wasn't the end of the world, so we decided on June 4th to June 9th. Everything was working out perfectly. I let both of our families know to mark our wedding down for those dates and started wedding planning. It was all perfect until last night. I got a FaceTime from my dad, who showed me the ultrasound, and I was super excited, all of the congratulations, jumping around because I'm going to be an auntie. I'm so excited for them and for my future niece or nephew. But it all came crashing down when I asked my sister when she was due, and she said, May 1st, so we're going to have to talk about your wedding. I assumed she just meant she wasn't going to be able to attend. So I told her that it's okay, we can just FaceTime her in, and her jaw dropped. Then my mom said, we can just push it back to September. I knew my emotions would get the best of me, so I said we could talk about it later. Then we went back to congratulations and thinking of baby names. After the call, I can't lie, I had a bit of a breakdown. I already moved my dates once to accommodate my sister, which was fine, and I didn't push back. But after 7 months of planning our wedding around this date and having my fiancé's family plan around it, I don't want to change it again. Unfortunately, I know my family, and they will push for me to move it and will disrespect my decision if I don't. I know traveling with a newborn is going to be hard, which is why I offered to FaceTime her in. But it seems like they find it offensive that my sister wouldn't be present at the wedding. I feel so insanely guilty about being upset over having to change my wedding dates because my sister is pregnant. She's bringing a beautiful new family member into our lives, but I'm still a bit heartbroken. If I don't change the wedding date, I'll be seen as inconsiderate and an asshole in my family. Update. So a lot has happened in the past few days. I called my brother the day after I made my post. He understood where I was coming from and told me that I should absolutely not change my wedding date. Since I was worried about speaking to my mom and being ganged up on, we planned when to talk to my mom about not wanting to change my fiancé's and my wedding dates, so he could be there to talk to her on my behalf. My emotions got the best of me. That didn't happen. My mom called me the next day to talk it over. I informed her that I was not going to change my wedding date, and she was upset initially but surprisingly receptive to it. I was extremely happy about that until she said, you need to talk to your sister about this because she's not going to be happy about being forced out 1 month postpartum. I explained I wasn't expecting or forcing her to attend, and then my mom said, no, she's coming to your wedding. I don't care if she's a new mom. After that, I got into a bit of an argument with my mom about her forcing my sister to do something that isn't the best for her and her future family. I ended up hanging up on her. I don't take being spoken to in a harsh tone easily and will tell the other person to take a minute to reevaluate their tone and come back. During the call, she also let slip that she was extremely disappointed in me for going to my brother for support instead of her and said I was just creating family drama for no reason. It is what it is. I needed a family perspective, which is why I called my brother. I ended up trying to call my sister the next day, but she declined. So I texted her and informed her that I would not be changing my wedding dates. It was a much longer text explaining my reasons and emotions. She replied a day later, you and I both know that your wedding dates aren't officially set, and the only hassle would be communicating the change to your fiancé's family. I hope the hassle is worth excluding my and your literal nieces or nephews. I explained that I have already ordered / put money down on multiple things, and my fiancé's family has been planning around this date for 7 months. She wasn't receptive in my opinion and said, there are really no excuses. You have the power to move the date even just a little later in the summer to include me, and you're choosing not to. That hurts. I responded that I was not choosing to exclude her from my wedding but understood she may not be able to come and would have to FaceTime in instead. I also explained that I had already moved my wedding date once to accommodate her. I asked her to try to put herself in my shoes and how she would have felt if I had asked to push back her wedding. She replied, I would have moved my date in a heartbeat. That's the difference between us. At that point, I decided to offer pushing it back to June 26th as some comments suggested to see if she would still be going on her previously planned vacation. I'm glad I did because she told me she couldn't do the 26th as she was still going on vacation 20 days after my wedding. I'm not the most knowledgeable about babies since I don't have one and have only known my best friend's baby, but I don't think there's a huge difference between traveling with a 1-month-old and a 1.5-month-old. That solidified for me that she doesn't care about me, my fiancé, or our feelings, but still expects everyone to accommodate her. At this point, as per my fiancé's advice, I'm putting it in the I F it drawer in my head, and I'm not going to stress about it anymore. Everyone knows the date is set. If my family wants to show up to my wedding, that would be amazing, but if not, I won't be upset. At the end of the day, this will show me who to prioritize as family in my life because family is not always blood.